Good evening, everyone. It's Monday evening, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on April 12th, and welcome to this week's version in blog post, The Author's Pen. As you all know, the second Monday of every month is my video blog post. So tonight, I've gotten quite a few requests to talk about gun control. And I'm going to be honest with you, gun control is kind of a pet peeve for me as well. And that's why I decided to make my video blog post about that. Now, at the risk of making this post an hour or 2 hours long, there's a lot of things I'm going to summarize. But before we actually get into the topic of gun control, there's a few things that we need to understand. And that's what I want to start off with tonight. I've been an NRA instructor for going on 40 years. I carry a firearm. I have for that same amount of time, if not a little bit longer. And I do it because I do believe that every American and every citizen has the right to exercise their Second Amendment rights to bear arms and protect their loved ones, their property, as well as themselves in a life-threatening situation. However, that comes with a great degree of responsibility. And we all have opinions on things. So some of this is going to be factual and data, and all the credits for all the references and websites for the information I'm about to present to you, I'm going to either, I'll put up at the end. But there's truth, there's fact, and there's myth. All right? So, we try and validate why we are able to talk about these things. We hear a lot of commentators and news media folks talk about mass shootings, active shooter situations, and so on and so forth. But, the reality is there's very few that have actually lived that life. I, as well as many others, have. And I want to briefly talk to you about that before we talk about gun control, because gun control is not a political issue as it's being made to be today. It's not an issue of what the Democrats believe, what the Republicans believe. Gun control is about making sensible choices and decisions, not about what one political party believes or what another political party believes, because the Second Amendment is the Second Amendment, and that speaks for itself. But however, in order to control gun violence to some degree, we have to come up with gun control that makes sense. So, again, as I stated, I've been an NRA instructor for 40 years, and I spent 38 years of my life as a combined professional career firefighter as well as a paramedic working in an inner city environment. Now, I've seen a lot over those years, and during those years, I've cared for over 70,000 patients. And I've seen a lot change in the police service. When I started my career in pre-hospital medicine in the state that I happen to have worked in, our state was broken down into 5 individual regions. And our region had an average medical call volume of about 32,000 calls a year. By the time I stopped working in that profession, because I did reach an age where after spending, I would say, 28 years of that on the road, working in an ambulance, I decided I had seen enough, I had had enough. And, I suffered many injuries. I had 13 job-related surgeries, and I said my time on the road is enough. And the rest of my career was spent in management until I decided to just leave that field altogether. By the time I left that field, our region's call volume exceeded over 130,000 calls a year. And those were the calls that just our region responded to. This is not including the number of people that take themselves to the hospital, or a shooting occurs and someone throws their friend in a car and drives them to the hospital. So those numbers in reality are actually higher. And I have a lot of notes here, so excuse me if I have to peek down, because there's a lot of things to talk about. But with all the new wave of police reform and so on that's going on today, the worst thing I think we could do is reduce our police force. it's a known fact, and the facts speak for themselves. That since that has happened in many cities, in many states across the country, crime has gone up. And I just want to give you a perfect example of that. What most people don't understand about the world is there's two worlds. The problem is you only know the world that you live in. And let me explain to you what I mean by that. There's a day world and a night world. Now, before I got hired on the fire department, I owned my own business, and I loved being a paramedic. But the only time I was able to work as a paramedic was third shift on the overnight, and I did that for many years. Luckily enough, I had a successful business, so I was able to get some sleep in the morning, and my employees would open it up. I would go in for the day, and so on and so forth. But again, I said there's two worlds. There's the day world. Now, the day world is the people like you and I that get up every single day. We go to work, we come home, we enjoy our evenings with the family, we go out to dinner, we do whatever, and then we go to sleep. The problem is when you go to sleep, there's another world that comes to life, and that's the night world. And don't think for 1 second it does not exist, because I could tell you from firsthand experience, it does. The people that live in the night world, you do not see during the day, because during the day they're sleeping. But by 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, especially on a Friday or a Saturday night, your drug dealers are out, your gangs are roaming the streets. That's when a lot of your shooting and violent crime happens. Women of the night are out walking the streets, and I could tell you from working in a very dangerous inner city environment for that many years that everybody knows what street corner to go on, that you could get anything you want, any type of drug, any type of weapon, a gun, female companionship, male companionship, I don't care what it is. That's the night world. And that's the world that exists that many people do not know about. Our police services across the country do an outstanding job. They have multiple resources to be able to curtail violent crime sometimes before it happens. But the problem is you can't have a police officer everywhere, on every street, on every block, in every city, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And, every fireman, every paramedic, every police officer has a story. But I want to tell you one story that happened to me about 2:30 in the morning, one evening. We got called to an unconscious, unresponsive patient in a parking lot. Well, we're trained how to approach these people for our own safety. But you never know what's going to happen. You never know what the unexpected is going to be. There was not a police officer at the time that was available that could respond with us. And we responded alone. And that's what we found when we got there. As we approached this patient, and we approached this patient the way we were trained to approach him, the patient sprung up out of nowhere, pulled a hunting knife out of his back of his pants, and came at us. Now, obviously, our first reaction is to get back to the ambulance and lock the doors, call for help. Well, that's obviously what we attempted to do. Now, I stand 6'4", 220 pounds. So let's just assume for 1 second that I'm capable of taking care of myself. But I was working with a female partner, and luckily enough, she was able to get into the ambulance and lock the door. I made sure that she did that, but I did not have time to get to the other side before this assailant was upon me. So now I'm in a situation where I have nothing to defend myself, okay? And now I'm wrestling with this drunk guy carrying a hunting knife, all right? Luckily enough, I was able to disarm him, and we started wrestling, fighting, rolling on the ground. My partner called for help. Some of this information I found out afterwards, because when you're in this situation, minutes seem like days or even hours. And there was no police officer available. Every police officer was on a call. And this was at a time many years ago before we were cutting back on our police services. So immediately, the police department dispatched a state police officer. Now, anybody who knows anything about the state police, they have a wide area to coverage, so you have no idea how long it's going to take a state police officer to get there. So meanwhile, the struggle is going on. I finally able to get the guy in a position on the ground where I was able to hold him in place. But I'm not going to lie to you, I was getting tired, okay? I'm a strong guy, but you know what? Fights aren't like you see on TV. People get tired. So to make a long story short, there was only one other ambulance available on duty that was not on a call, so our dispatcher dispatched another crew to try and assist us. Well, as it turns out, this whole episode of me wrestling with this guy and getting him on the ground and holding him, trying to hold him in place, lasted pretty close to 17, 18 minutes before our ambulance crew, another ambulance crew, and a state police officer arrived, was able to cuff him, and I was beat. I was literally exhausted, bottom line. Subsequently, what happened was he went to court, he was arrested, and he did jail time because that's a felony, okay? The moral of the story is this happens all the time. Didn't just happen to me. It happens to first responders all the time. And now we're in a position that many factions want to decrease our police services. Well, you know, I worked the third shift in some of the worst years in my state's history, and that's the late 80s into the 90s, where gang violence was at its highest. Shootings were out of control. People were getting shot and murdered 7 nights a week, okay? To the point where we would go to work with bulletproof vests on, to the point where we couldn't respond to a medical call in a certain neighborhood without having a police escort because we would be putting our lives at risk. More than once, I brought an ambulance back to the garage with gunshot holes in it, all right? In my career, I've been stabbed, jumped, beaten up, and as I said, I've had 13 job-related surgeries, all right? It comes with the job. I was lucky I survived it. Some people don't. So my point in telling you this story is there are 2 different worlds. And a lot of the night world you don't hear about on the news, all right? They talk about gun violence. They talk about the number of people killed with guns. Well, let me tell you, in my years on the road, in an inner city environment, I have seen more people beaten to death by gangs, bludgeoned and heads cracked open from baseball bats and other weapons than I've seen gunshot wounds. Okay? So let's talk about a little bit of statistics, just for a little bit. The media tends to hype things up. No offense to the media, I'm not knocking them. It's what they do. Unfortunately, bad news makes news. Good news very rarely does. The problem is, we use the term mass shootings. But if you were to look up the definition of mass shootings, it's very vague. They don't put a number on it. So how do you define what a mass shooting is? Now, we talk about Columbine, we talk about Sandy Hook. These were all tragedies that need to come to a stop. But they need to come to a stop with sensible gun control laws. So basically, it's a vague definition, and it's clarified as when there are multiple victims. Well, in my opinion, anything more than one is multiple, all right? But if you take that definition even further, multiple is viewed as anything that has many parts to it, is actually the way the definition reads. It still doesn't define. So when there's a shooting, it's classified as mass shooting, and now the world thinks 50, 100, 200 people were involved. Well, as far as I'm concerned, in any shooting environment where more than one person has been shot, it's a mass shooting. That's just my personal opinion. And I could tell you, I have been in active shooting environments where you're rushing in while shots are still being fired to try and take care of a fallen police officer or someone else who's been shot. It's not fun, and it's real. I've responded to many active shooter situations. With what our men and women in blue do is the bravest thing to ever witness in your life. And honestly, it's something you do not want to witness, all right? But like the old saying goes, it's a dirty job, somebody has to do it. So I have the utmost respect for our police officers. And I'm not going to sit here for 1 minute and say every police officer is perfect, every firefighter is perfect, every first responder is perfect. And yes, there does need to be some form of police reform to try and weed out those that are not. But you're not going to do it by reducing the size of the police force, because that is also a part of gun control, having the enforcement and things like that ready. So if you remember correctly, when I started this, I said gun control should not be a Democratic or a Republican or a political issue. It should be an issue of making sensible gun control. Okay, so let's talk about a few things. It's unfortunate, but a lot of times when we see incidents of mass shootings, it gets back to someone who's had some type of behavioral or mental illness. So let's talk about this. The statistics, and again, all the credits will be at the end, and you could certainly go to any one of these websites and see that these statistics are in fact and truth. Over 32,000 people are killed every single year by guns. Out of those 32,000, believe it or not, 19,000 of those people are killed by their own hand, meaning it's possible suicide. But with that, there's another 74,000 or more that are injured through the use of guns. Now, again, understand, these are the data and the statistics that we know about. Some psychiatric figures that are going to scare you. Nearly 50% of all Americans will experience some form of mental illness in their life. In most cases, it's minor. It could be a short period of depression because they lost their job, a short period of depression because they went through a bad divorce, and these type of things they recover from. However, not all conditions are temporary. Some are very serious, and some of the issues with mental illness go back many, many years into a person's history. And the problem with this is we don't see this until it's gotten to a point where it's manifested that we are now seeing it in this person's outward behavior. We start to see the signs and symptoms of it. The posts on social media, the whatever comments they may make in school or in public, or so on and so forth. So in reality, when it comes to mass shootings, because of people with mental illness, it really represents less than 1% of the killings that are done in a year, or I should say homicides due to gun violence, less than 1%. Overall, people with mental illness contribute to about 3% of the total violent crimes. So sometimes mental illness gets a bad rap, all right? Because if you look in the numbers and you look at the data, it's not as bad, and I'm not saying that it isn't bad, it's not as bad as the media presents it to be. However, and let's make something perfectly clear here, any one person that dies due to gun violence that could have been avoided is one too many. And I want to make that perfectly clear. So, a lot of these statistics, unfortunately, are not accumulated until sometimes a year or so later. So the last firm statistics are back in September 17, 2019, where there were 301 mass shootings in the United States. But in another study, it found that 1/3 of those mass shootings were committed by people with mental illnesses. Now, when you think of the total population, you say to yourself, that's not really a lot. But remember what I said. Anything over 1 or even 1 is not acceptable. Today, these numbers are even higher, even though the final numbers for 2020 have not really been tabulated yet. So before I want to go over a little bit more data with you before we talk about actual gun control itself. The United States as a country is 3.797 million square miles. Our U.S.-Canada border is 5,525 miles. Our Atlantic border is 28,673. The Gulf, 17,141. The Pacific, 40,297. And the Arctic is 2521. That gives our country about 89,000 miles of border. Now, what does that mean? That means anywhere throughout that, and unfortunately, and I don't mean to stereotype this, so please don't take it wrong, but unfortunately, most of the illegal contraband that comes into this country, whether it be drugs, weapons, people trafficking, or whatever, is in our southern border, the border that lines Mexico. Now, regardless of your beliefs with regards to President Trump, you can't deny his numbers, all right? The illegal crossings were down to 34,000 last year, and now we have 174,000 that have entered this country so far now. And as you've all heard on the news, the Border Control has found 2 of those being on the terrorist watch list and many other different types of individuals. And that's the ones that they have caught. So the reason for all this data is to let you know, or to point out to you, that you could close every gun manufacturer down in the United States. You could throw them out of the country and tell them they can never manufacture a gun in this country again. And you will not stop illegal weapons from coming into this country. Period. End of story. It is estimated, and this is only estimated by the number of weapons that are confiscated. This does not include the ones that get through that we don't even know about. But 213,000 illegal weapons of various types are smuggled across our southern border each year. Okay? Think about that. 213,000 illegal guns. So, do you think putting super stringent controls on the gun itself is going to stop illegal weapons from coming into this country? And I didn't write this statistic down, but I remember reading it. I think it was 89.6% of homicides that were committed with guns were illegal weapons, not weapons that were legally bought. Because there are some homicides that happen that people who are registered gun owners, who have a gun permit, have literally shot someone for legitimate self-defense reasons. All right? So the problem really does not lie, if we're going to talk about what makes sense about gun control, the problem doesn't lie with the law-abiding citizen. It lies with the criminals, the people who get their hands on these illegal weapons. And remember what I told you, because I've seen it and witnessed it firsthand. In the night world, you could get anything you want on most street corners in the inner city. And we've already talked about the estimated guns that are confiscated each year illegally that come in from other countries. So now let's get to the actual topic of gun control. What is sensible gun control? Well, again, I am not going to be one of these gun-toting, irate citizens, because I believe there's a lot of flaws in our gun control system. And I say this not only as a citizen of this country, I say it as an NRA instructor. All right? I think the course itself could probably be a little bit better. All right? I also think the background check is absolutely absurd. All right? And it has been for years. It's a flawed system. Now, the reason for that is because one of the largest problems we have is every state has its own rules, has its own gun laws, its own process for getting a permit. Some states do it differently than others. Whenever you do not have consistency, you have problems. Now, I am not saying that an individual state should not be able to set certain gun laws for their state. They certainly have the right and should be able to do that. But you know what? It comes down to dollars and cents. There should not be state permits. The Second Amendment doesn't apply to just one state or this state or another state. It applies to us as a nation. Gun permits should be federal. And the background check should be stringent. And I'm going to give you an example, and then I'm going to tell you what I think should be happening. I'm a United States Coast Guard licensed master captain. Like my gun permit, I have to renew that every 5 years. But let me tell you what the difference is. When I go to renew my gun permit, I send in a picture, fill out an application, I send it in, I'm sure they do a quick background check, and they renew my permit. My boat captain license is totally different. Every 5 years, besides having to assess to my sea time and something in my ship logs and so on and so forth, my background check is a full background check. Again, number one, I have to list every medication that I'm on. I have to go to my doctor. He's got to give me a physical. He's got to sign off on it. And no matter what medication I'm on, if let's say, for example, I had high blood pressure or diabetes, he has to attest to if those conditions are under control. However, there's some exceptions. If I'm on chronic pain medications, if I'm on any type of antidepressants or anything for behavioral problems, all right, my captain's license will not get renewed because I could be operating a boat where I'm responsible for hundreds of lives. Okay? That is a background check. That is a proper background check. Remember what I said earlier. Someone can have behavioral issues at a very young age, and they may suffer from it their whole life. And no one will know it until we start to see the signs and symptoms as it manifests as they get older. But meanwhile, if they have a gun permit, they're renewing that every single year, all right? As their mental illness condition gets worse, they become on psychotic medications, antidepressants, and so on and so forth. So the background checks is horrible. My point here is we have the model in place. The federal government, through one of its entities, has the model in place to do the type of thorough background check that's necessary. Now, I also mentioned earlier that this comes down to an issue of dollars and cents. Let's not kid ourselves. The state doesn't want to lose, or the states, I should say, don't want to lose the money of the gun permits. Thousands of them getting renewed on a yearly basis. Well, there's a fix for that. If it was a federal gun permit that covered you in all states, then the background check would be universal for everybody across the country. And it should be that type of intense background check where before I renew my gun permit, I go to my doctor, my medications have to be listed, and so on and so forth. Okay? Again, that model is in place. And this is how we can control seeing how people change and develop over time. As I said, I've had my gun permit for over 40 years. Now, luckily for me, I don't have any mental illnesses. You might talk to other people that might tell you different, but I don't. But there's many people that have developed them. And those are the ones that get through the cracks because the background check is horrible. So, I, for one, holding a gun permit, would be more than happy to pay even double or triple what it costs for me to renew my gun permit every 5 years for a thorough background check, to have it be universal, so it's a federal permit, it's consistent across all 50 states, and then the federal government can give some of that money back to the individual states so the states don't lose their revenue. Because when it comes to people's lives, it should not be about dollars and cents. And for those senators or governors of states, I am not saying, nor am I implying, that you shouldn't have the right to set the standards for certain gun laws in your own state, such as how a gun should be stored in a home, so on and so forth. Look, I take what I do very seriously. When I got my gun permit, I went up to Massachusetts and took a 2-week gun self-defense course. My guns are all locked in my house in a safe. The states have the right to set those kind of rules. But they need to be sensible gun laws. Sensible gun control laws that are nationwide, not just state by state. All right? It's a standard that needs to be set. And that's what gun control is all about. When you talk about putting a weapon in someone's hand, such as a firearm, okay, that has the ability to take the life of another human being, that is a huge responsibility. Just as huge as it is for me to captain a boat that's got 80 or 90 passengers on it, that if I do something stupid or hit something, I could kill 80 or 90 people in one shot. All right? And if that mechanism is in place, my question is, why are we not using it for something as important as gun control? That's what we need to do with gun control in this country. Because remember, I told you, you are never, absolutely never going to stop the number of illegal weapons coming into this country. And criminals don't have to apply for a gun permit. They have a plethora of different ways to get weapons. So the only way to control the criminal side of it is to support our men and women in law enforcement. We have to give them the resources, the man and woman power that they need to do their jobs. And that's the bottom line. If you sacrifice any link in the chain, okay, that chain becomes weak. And that is something in the situation that we have right now in this country. We are a weak chain because we have very many weak links. We need to strengthen those links so our chain becomes strong. So let's not take it out on law enforcement. Let's not take it out on fire service, first responders, things of that nature. Let's make common sense gun control laws that are at least going to, if nothing else, curb the violence that we know we can control. You are never going to curb the gang violence. You are never going to curb the drive-by shootings, because we can never have a police officer on every street corner in this country 24 hours a day. But we can't weaken our police service to the point that it makes these things happen. All right? Think about last year, the summer of last year. Think about New York. All right? I'm not going to sit here and give you all the figures and waste your time. You can find all of that stuff online. All right? Violent crimes, gun use, shootings, drive-by shootings, babies killed in carriages by stray bullets, everything went up exponentially because of what we did to our police force. We have to fix every weak link in the chain. But when it comes to good gun control laws, we have to start making our background checks make sense. Make them that we could weed out or find the people that should no longer be holding a gun permit. And if they shouldn't be holding a gun permit, they shouldn't be owning a firearm. And I have no problem whatsoever being a legal gun owner, having a weapon confiscated from someone who is not mentally stable to be owning one. All right? I don't care what the Second Amendment says. Everything has its limits. Okay? That's my topic on gun control tonight. I don't know if any of that makes sense to you. I certainly hope it does. Like I said at the end, I'll roll the credits. Feel free to go to any one of these websites and read about it. I tried to summarize this up very, very quickly for you. But everything in this world that we do comes down to common sense and doing what makes sense that's going to work. And I can tell you now, speaking for many legal gun owners that I know that have permits and carry weapons, there is not one of them that I have not spoken to about this where they have said, no, I'm against that. Every one of them would be perfectly willing to go to their doctor every 5 years, have their medications listed, have their doctor attest to their physical and mental state in order to get their permits renewed, because it's not the legal, non-dangerous people that we have to worry about in the world. It's the ones that are suffering from mental illness that really aren't responsible for their actions because it's an issue for them. It's a medical issue. And those are the ones that we have to weed through the cracks, not only to protect themselves, but to protect others. Because remember, I said earlier on that out of the 32,000 people killed with guns, 19,000 are by their own hand. That could be 19,000 lives that we're saving. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I hope you kind of got something out of it. And again, I do a weekly blog every Monday evening at the same time. 3 weeks of the month are written. The second Monday is a video blog post. But for now, stay well, be safe, and God bless. Thank you so much.